Hi everybody. In the previous video, we got an overview of what React is and also some things it does that make it so cool. Now, what we didn't do in the previous video though is go beyond the basics. We looked at some pictures, looked at some text, and you heard me talking the entire time, but we didn't really write any code. Well, we're going to fix that in this video. In this video, we're going to learn how to build our very first React app. So let's get started. The first thing to keep in mind is that a browser only understands HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, I know that seems like it's common sense, but here's the reason why I'm bringing it up. A lot of times when you're building an app, you will rarely write things in pure HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You'll be writing in CoffeeScript or TypeScript or Less and Sass. All these technologies have their own syntax and way of defining things, which a browser will have no clue what to do. So there's always an intermediate step where we go from what you wrote to something a browser understands. Now, ignoring all of that, let's focus on React and our current situation we're in. So we saw earlier that the way you define your markup in React is by putting it inside your JavaScript using this bizarre syntax known as JSX. Now, that syntax, our browser has no idea what to do with it. So what we need is a way to go from JSX to regular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So there are two ways of going about this. One way is what is commonly known as the modern development workflow, where we set up a development environment built around Node, Webpack, Babel, and a whole string of various acronyms and name brands that kind of get you up and running. The other approach is where we let our browser automatically convert the JSX to JavaScript at runtime. Now, both these approaches have their pros and cons, and ultimately the best answer is to always set up a development environment, but for convenience, and for what we're trying to do right now, which is learn React, we're going to let the browser handle all this conversion from JSX to plain JavaScript. Now, convenience is one thing, like I mentioned, but the other reason is this. Setting up a web development environment, it's time consuming. It's a distraction in my opinion, especially at this early stage where we just want to build an app in React. We just want to get some JSX written and see how things go. So with that, let's get started. So all you really need for this is a code editor. You can use any one you want. I have no particular one that I'm going to recommend. My favorite is Atom, but you can use Visual Studio Code, you can use Sublime, TextMate, or if you want to be really old school, you can just use something like Notepad or TextEdit, so you don't get any syntax highlighting whatsoever. So all you really need though is just an HTML page. Make sure to create a new one and just add the following contents into it. Now take a few moments to pause if you need some time to copy all this in, but all we're really doing is just creating the bare minimum scaffolding needed to define an HTML page. We have our doc type, we have our HTML tag, the character set, title, body, script, nothing too crazy. So the first thing we're going to do is, make sure you have all of this, is add the libraries for React. Seems kind of relevant, right? Given that we're building an app for React, that we actually have the React content, be included in some form or fashion. So I'm going to go ahead and add two script tags. I'm going to copy and paste this in, and you're going to have to write this in, of course. And make sure to copy both of these files into your document. You need to have one for React.js, which is the core library. Then you also need one for React DOM.js, which is helper methods that are very specific to modifying the contents of our document. And the version we're going for is version 15. There may be more recent versions out there, but to keep things consistent, I'm using the hard-coded version 15 as opposed to the latest, just in case there are some breaking changes. All right, so far so good. So we have our HTML page, we've added the React library. Now, all we need to do next is make sure to add the transpiler that goes from React specific JSX to something a browser understands. And we're going to be using Babel for that. If you're familiar with Babel, you know exactly what it's going to do. If you're not familiar with it, I'm going to explain it very briefly. First, add this third script element to it. And Babel is more commonly used as part of your modern development environment to turn your random code into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This version of Babel we're including does all its magic in the browser itself. That's part of the step number 2, or approach number 2 we looked at in the slides a few moments ago. So now we have both the React library and the mechanism for turning a React markup into something that our browser understands. All that is left is actually write some React code. Now we're going to keep things very simple in this one. We just want to display some text on screen using some of the React methods. So the way we're going to do that is by using a method called render, and that lives on the React DOM object. So I'm going to type in my script, I'm going to type in React DOM, and I'm going to type in render. That's it. Now, by just doing this, nothing's going to get displayed on the screen. Nothing's going to happen because the render method takes two arguments. The first argument is the JSX content you want to print out, or I'm going to call it right now just the HTML-like content you want to print. And the second argument is going to be the element you want to print this content into. So for the first argument, let's go and specify what we want to print. I want to print out the word Sherlock, 2 words, Sherlock Holmes. And I'm specifying H1, and I'm closing my H1 as well. So we're going to print out this heading 1 tag with the text Sherlock Holmes. Now I'm going to specify comma and specify a second argument, which is where we want our render method to spit that content out. And I'm going to keep it simple. This is document.body. All right. So we specified a React render method, and we need to make sure that it gets displayed, right? Let's see how it all works. Now I have Adam's live HTML preview going on here, which means that any change I make here will eventually show up in real time. In your case, you might need to save your document, view it in the browser. Whatever your workflow allows for, you should do that. So right now I have my code, I have everything seems to be working, yet nothing seems to be getting displayed. Why is that? Well, the reason is because we're using Babel to do a in-browser compilation, we need to specify that it needs to do that on this particular script tag. So we're going to specify a type attribute and set this to text/Babel. And once you've done that, you're going to see in a few moments, you see the words hello world, or you see, at least in this case, Sherlock Holmes appear on screen. And notice what you see here. You see the words Sherlock Holmes appear. If I were to rename this, let's say Iron Man, jump completely from 1800s detective to Avenger style superhero, you have Iron Man displayed right here. So at least what we can tell is that what we're seeing here, the React render method, is working. We can have the React library is being called, and Babel is turning all of this, bizarre browser unintelligible code into something that can actually be displayed on screen. So that's actually a great first step. Now we're not done yet though. Now that we have this part working, let's go and go a little bit further. So we already changed the name a few times, and let's actually create an element here. Document.body isn't really the best way to actually have your content be displayed. We're going to div, give an ID value of container, and let me just go and close this div. All right. So now what I'm going to do is instead of printing everything to document.body, I want all of my content to be printed inside the div whose ID value is container. So let me go ahead and replace document.body with document.querySelector, and that's for the hashtag container. What we're saying is all this stuff is going to be printed into our container element. So you see Iron Man displayed. Great, nothing has changed here. So we've gone one step further by specifying a custom element that is in markup with an ID value of container. Now let's go further. Let's actually change from H1 Iron Man to display something that is a little bit different. Like let's say your name. In my case, I'm going to print my name out there, Krupa. In your case, you should put your name there just to personalize a little bit, and just to see, once again that everything you're seeing here is live, and what's going to be happening is the code is being printed to our container element. That's great. And so we've done all of this, and now let's do one last thing before we wrap it up. The way your name is displayed, it's pretty plain, right? It's just displayed in Times New Roman, which is probably one of my biggest fears in life, is that one day I wake up and everything around me is displayed in style Times New Roman. Let's go and style this up. Now, there is a way to style content in React, which is not using your style tag in regular CSS. But for now, we're just going to keep it very simple and just focus on trying to keep it familiar with what we already know. So I'm going to create a style tag, and let's go ahead and put 2 style rules in there. Let's create one for hashtag container. And inside this one, let's give it a padding value of 50 pixels and a background color of, let's say, a light gray. And once you've done that, you'll sort of see that, the page here will modify a little bit to contain that. You can see that my name is now in that little bit further from the edges of the browser with a light gray background displaying behind it. And it's actually style a text as well, container H1. So I'm basically styling the heading tag that's going to be printed inside our container element. Let's make the font size for that 48 pixels. Font family, let's keep it sans serif, keep it professional. And let's give it a color that is 008088. I didn't have it memorized. I actually have a note on the side that tells me what it needs to be. And notice what you see here. You now see our text that is styled a little bit differently than what it was before. So that's pretty cool, right? So we can do a lot more, but for now, let's just keep it as it is and, and celebrate that we've just built our very first React app. So there you have it. We created a new HTML document, added the React library, added the library from Babel to do some of the compilation from, or transpilation from JSX to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then we actually created something cool, well, using the React DOM's render method, which takes two arguments, which is the HTML you want to print and where you want it to be printed. Now, if this all seemed a little bit confusing to you, go back and play the example some more, modify the styling a bit. I just want to get comfortable with React. I want to get comfortable with the process and the workflow we're going to follow for going from what we have now to something more involved and more complex in subsequent videos. So with that, if you have any questions, post in the forums at forum@crypto.com. It's the easiest way to get in touch with me and to get help from others if they are also interested in React also. And if you have any questions, you already know how to do that. Tell your friends and enemies so they can post their questions as well. Or if you like this video, hit subscribe so you can be notified of more videos of this kind that'll come out. Follow me at Karupa for bite-sized updates on not just React topics, but web development topics in general. And of course, buy my book, Learning React, where you can learn not just about this topic, but a whole host of topics in both Kindle and paperback editions, available at Amazon.com and even real physical bookstores if your town has them still. So check it out there. Right, guys. See you all next time.